Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. We've long heard about the great divide between beef producers and consumers who enjoy their product. But you know what? That divide might not be as great as some of us have long thought. So, Elanco Animal Health has recently conducted a comprehensive set of surveys of producers and consumers, revealing, among other things, the shared values of the beef industry and consumers. Here with us today to talk about this is Katie Cook, Vice President, Farm Animal Innovation and Marketing at Elanco. Welcome, Katie. Thank you for being with us here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here to talk about it.
For those of you that are joining us here online, we thank you for taking the time to tune in. If you have any questions, feel free to post those there in the chat area on the right side of your screen. If you're joining us from social media, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, please post your questions directly in those channels, and we'll be able to get those over to Katie. So, Katie, let's dig in. We're excited to hear about the findings, but before we go too far into those, let's have you talk a little bit about the surveys themselves and how they were conducted. Kind of set that stage for us, if you would, please.
Yeah, so we've been doing a number of surveys over the past couple of years, looking at both feedlot producers as well as our beef consumers, and really understanding what their thoughts are around innovation, sustainability, and how those two things come together, or in some cases don't come together. So we've done a number of different studies, from looking at first just baselining and having some exploratory questions with both the producers as well as the consumers. Then we went into a qualitative analysis where we had the focus groups, had more of those questions, and then most recently have done some quantitative research with about 1,300 consumers to really understand what's happening in the market, and doing it over a course of a couple of years to see how that's changing. As you know, sustainability is a fast evolving space. Mm-hmm. And so we want to make sure that we understand where we're at today as that changes within 12 months, as many of us have seen.
Sounds like you've been doing a lot of work in this area. That's exciting. So now the main focus of these surveys is that of environmental sustainability. What were some of the kind of main key takeaways that you've found up until this point?
Yeah, so I would say as I said, there's a lot of common ground between our beef producers as well as our consumers as we think about sustainability and their perceptions around sustainability. So I'd say kind of the three main things that we've seen is one, both producers as well as consumers indicate that environmental sustainability is important to them. They're both willing. The second part is to make decisions and take steps to make environmental sustainability a more important and prominent role within their everyday lives or operations. And then the third part is they do support the role of innovation and how that can play as we think about environmental sustainability, environmental stewardship, and how we continue to advance that across the beef industry.
What about trust? I mean, we always have to look at that, right? Where consumers, are they trusting of producers? Did the surveys at all look into kind of where we're at in that trust meter for the beef industry?
Yeah, absolutely. They did. Just as an interesting backdrop on that, 78% of the consumers indicated that they do trust cattle ranchers to ensure food safety, ultimately showing that the beef producers are a trusted source of information for the consumers. And this really helps exemplify the fact that we as an industry should continue to equip and support our communication efforts and really make sure that we're talking about what we do on the farm and the importance of our practices as we continue to move forward.
Well, that's good news. They trust us, right? As beef producers, they trust
as beef producers, yes.
So now, in addition to looking at cattle ranchers and feed yard managers, when it comes to consumer trust, you also looked at something in the social media influencers and how they came in. They came in a lot lower on that trust meter. Kind of walk us through what do you consider the social media influencer, and why do you think there was such a lower level of trust there?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I'll just start with what did the survey even ask, right? So just so that you guys all have a great baseline understanding, the survey asked, how much do you trust, and then fill in the blank. Is it the USDA, the cattle rancher, social media, to ensure that your food you buy is safe to eat? To give you just the spectrum of where they were social media rated relative to others, right? The highest trust included the USDA at 79%. Cattle ranchers were then 78%. You had your grocery store, your retailers at 78%. And then social media was at 37%. Now, there's probably lots of reasons. You can think of me about what's happened in our world outside of agriculture, why there's questions about social media. But I think, part of it is really, as you think about outside of the rural areas where cattle are produced, there's just a big disconnect between beef producers and the consumers. And only half of those customers that we surveyed said that they're even familiar with what's happening in the U.S. beef industry. So it's interesting that they have a high level of trust. But I think as you think about, even you and I get on Facebook, there's so much stuff that is just based on what you're actually filtering for. And I think as you see with some of our political environment and things like that, consumers are much more aware of how that can be, how social media influencers are paid, and then all the different algorithms that you're starting to see on social media, which is what I believe is shifting that a bit as they think about who do they trust and who they not trust.
And that's pretty good news for agriculture overall, that consumers are saying, hey, it's social media. It is what it is. And, probably not what I want to go to for my source of information.
Absolutely.
So it's a good thing. So now, did the survey, it looked at how consumers define sustainability. And for that matter, I would think if they recognize that sustainability is about the environment, but it also has social and economic aspects to it. How did they look at that? How did they view that?
Yeah. So the survey, as you mentioned, did look at how consumers define sustainability. And we found that some consumers understand what it means, like holistically. But honestly, as you look at it, especially going into producers and consumers, we very much have a bias to it being one part or the other, right? So high level sustainability typically has social, economic, and environmental. Producers tend to look at it from the lens of economic, right? How am I economically viable? Consumers very much heavily trend towards the environmental sustainability piece. And what does that mean when you say sustainability? Automatically, that's where their head goes. And half of the beef consumers, said that they're at least somewhat familiar with what produces their meat, but they aren't really sure how sustainable the industry is. So we did that double click to say, that's what you think. What do you think about beef? I think that's an opportunity, right? As we think about ourselves as an industry, how do we continue to educate how beef is raised? They do trust us. They are willing to listen to us, but many of them continue to be distanced from the food that they eat.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So where did the survey, you looked at innovation and whether consumers are accepting of innovation in the beef industry, in their food, I guess I would say as well. Yep. What did you find there?
Yeah. So, some things will be a surprise and some things are not a surprise. As you think about the many different surveys that have happened in U.S. beef industry, particularly with consumers over the past 10, 20 years. The top three things are still price, quality, and freshness. For us in this study, it was price first, then quality, then freshness. You see many different iterations over the past 10 years of which one of those three leads or doesn't lead. But what we did ask then producers, okay, those are those three things. If those things are all equal, how likely are you to purchase beef raised with a product that helps the cattle's impact on the environment? And then it was unbranded and unaided. We gave them, okay, if you're shown product H, which was positioned as a feed ingredient that reduces ammonia gas emissions in beef cattle, how comfortable would you be buying that product? And what we found is actually they were very open to it from an innovation standpoint. In fact, 8 out of 10 of the consumers indicated that they were neutral to likely, as you think about that 5-point scale, to buy beef from cattle given this product if some of the conditions were met. So I think this is also part of the phenomenon as you continue to think about some of the events that have happened in our world. One, it has to be safe for the animal and for the human, right? So is it safe to give the animal? Is it safe for me to eat that beef? And then two, we need to know that it's actually effective in the environment and have the studies and those things to look at. But also really importantly is it needs to be at a comparable price point. So there is an interesting inflection there of we want it, but are we quite ready to pay for it? I'm not sure that our consumers are there yet today on that.
Interesting. So now the beef industry, how are they in terms of their willingness to accept innovation?
Yep. So that was a really good question. And our study actually found that the research that 2 out of the 5 feedlots expressed strong interest in incorporating innovations that would help reduce their feedlots' environmental impact. As we all know, our feedlot producers and beef producers in general run the whole spectrum from full in adopting sustainability efforts to a bit of disbelief in what are we doing. Although I would say we are all environmental stewards at our core. What we call it, I think, is sometimes more the sensitive piece versus what are we actually doing? Because I do believe fundamentally beef producers are trying to do what's right for the land, what's right for the animals, and continue to have a sustainable operation. But when we dug into that more on the feedlot producers, their most interest is obviously from putting a technology in. Sorry, my computer just went dark real quick. Technology in that doesn't negatively impact cattle performance while giving the environmental impact. So there's still that opportunity as you think about innovations, still making sure that we're becoming more efficient, and at a minimum, not having an impact as we think about how we do that. The other part, right, is they're also their main aim, and we talked about this earlier, is to remain financially viable. And leaving their operations for the generations to come, the land for those and others. So 80% of them really agree on the importance of their operation to be sustainable. Now, what that means, obviously, you have different people with different things, but 74% of them within that would say, as you're thinking about those technologies, or we're thinking about the innovations, really need to understand the financial impact. So they're willing to have the conversation. They just need to understand what's the implication to their overall business as they go about those practices.
One step at a time, right?
Yes. Yep.
Now consumers are of the mindset that perhaps the beef industry, needs to be a bit more sustainable. Do they say, okay, beef industry, you need to do this? Or do consumers recognize that, hey, maybe there's some stuff we should be doing as well to move the whole needle forward when it comes to sustainability on the beef side?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I would say when it comes to environmental sustainability, continuous improvement is a universal truth, whether we're talking to the producers or the consumers. And when we looked at into this consumer group in particularly, they agreed with both of these statements from both the producer standpoint as well as what can they do. Is one, they think that feed yard managers should do their part to help the planet by raising beef in an environmental friendly way. So more than 73% of the respondents agreed with that. They also agreed, though, at the same time that consumers should also be doing their part by buying beef that's raised in a more sustainable way. So 70% of them said, like, if there's an option, we need to be buying more sustainable beef. And they also, they themselves said that they want the environment to be left in good shape for future generations and are willing to do their own part, even if it's in small ways. So whether that is using the reusable water bottles or recycling your plastic bags, right? When you go to the grocery store, 78% of them said that they would be willing to adopt some of those small changes into their day-to-day lives to make sure that they're also doing their part for future generations.
Did you look at all in terms of age and how people would answer these questions based on, the generation where they're at?
Absolutely. And there's always trends, right? As you look at the different generations and the mindsets. So I'll start first with the producers and then go a little bit to the consumers. When we look at really what we're thinking about from a producer or consumer standpoint, the younger generation, Gen Z, which we defined as 18 to 24 years of age, they're significantly more likely to be on board with helping the industry make more sustainable practices. So they're very interested, they're very invested than when you see some of the other generations. Additionally, the younger generations, so your Gen Z and millennials, right? So still 40-ish and below, are more likely than the older generations to say that they'd be very or somewhat likely to purchase beef from a cattle given a product like Experior or some other technology that is reducing the carbon footprint, the ammonia emissions, whatever it may be for that animal.
So any final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was really interesting study. I think we've enjoyed getting to really dig in to understand what's happening with our producers and ultimately what's happening with our consumers and how that reflects what we do in the industry. I think the really good news for all of us that participate in this industry is that both producers and consumers are willing to accept innovations that can improve sustainability. And as a leader in animal health, our goal is to continue to walk alongside our customers with producers, with the nutritionists, with all of those other stakeholders as we think about how do we partner together to add value to the product that we ultimately bring and bring a safe, nutritious food supply, but also make sure that we're being sustainable and good stewards as we continue to pass it along to the generations and continue to make the beef industry and to make the beef producers more efficient. They're doing a great job. How do we can just keep on that continuous improvement and partner together to do that? So we've compiled a bunch of research. I've talked high level about some of the findings, but if you'd like to look about more of it, we do have it on a couple of our websites, and I know, so you'll have it linked in a few different places, but welcome any questions or conversation around it. We're excited to share this research and continue to partner with the different stakeholders within the industry.
Yeah, we'll put some links there for you all to access. If you have any questions, you can put those also again in the chat, and we'll make sure that Katie gets those. Thank you so much for your insight, Katie. That's Katie Cook, Vice President, Farm Animal Innovation and Marketing with Elanco. We appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you.
Likewise, we appreciate all of you joining us. We know you have busy schedules, so giving us a little bit of your day is very much appreciated. A reminder that all Feedstuffs 365 sessions are available on demand on feedstuffs365.com, so you can view those at any time and share those with your fellow colleagues and others if you so desire. Until next time, for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.